Guys, welcome back. I really appreciate Will jumping on with us today. And what we're talking about is Will's thoughts about how the CrossFit Games went this year. He had Tommy V with Invictus, and there were a lot of things that he picked up. So my first question, Will, is really just generally, what were some of the big takeaways that you took from the games this year?
One is be ready for change. As coaches, we're always preaching routine, habits routine, get in the rhythm, get in the zone. And in the back room, we're looking at that from a yearly planning cycle, is from when to peak, when to do intensification, when to do accumulation, and then also like context of what's within the events. So I think all of us are just ready for change.
So when you say that, would that mean that you would just throw forks in the road just to throw forks in the road as part of training, and that would actually be a good thing? What do you mean by being ready for change?
I think it's more of a mental thing now. This goes back to something I discussed with Tommy. I was like, hey, looking back at last year's 4-man games team, it was a shit ton of volume, and it was not that much different from an individual games. Like, you're going to have to do a lot of volume. We're going to have to do some pretty heavy simulations to get ready for it. We knew that there was going to be something different, but all we could do is prepare based on what we've seen in the past. And so again, moving forward to next year, he makes it individually, he makes it on a team. It'll be the same thing. I'll say, hey, look, our preparation is on the context of 2019. Those little small tweaks and changes, we're going to get as ready as we can, but I want you to mentally prepare that there might be that 2-week out curveball from the rules committee, which is something that's probably unique to our sport and our governing body kind of growing and figuring things out. So you just got to roll with the punches. You be in the best physical and mental shape possible, and just have a good relationship and get your athlete mentally in the right spot to deal with whatever happens.
I kind of talked similarly with Brian about this. It's like, is it actually okay for us to be surprised or confused that things change? It's like, we're too far along this process to just be like, oh man, this is terrible or great. It's just like, it just is. Things are going to change. And I think the better that an athlete can be ready for that, the more likelihood of success they'll have, because it just is lower stress. So what were some of the things that you picked up from Tommy and Invictus over the course of the games? What were some of the things you saw?
Well, one is that they're a hugely resilient team. So that, I think the teams was super stressful in the fact that every person on every team could look left and right and see a shit ton of past games athletes and like an immense talent that probably hasn't been as concentrated ever in the teams. So it was, you see in their performance, like they ended up on the podium, but they had some really low scores in there. And that's just a reflection of how talented and deep the field is. So for them to kind of like have a bad event, have a great event, have a medium event, have a bad event, have a great event, like they're super mentally resilient as a group. And again, probably the most, for me, obviously having coached Tommy for a long time, the most noticeable thing was his growth within his approach to competition, demeanor, leadership, all those pieces.
How do you think those things have changed? What are some of the changes, and how have those changes happened, do you think?
I think he, for the first time, is like, I've seen him willing to race, win, lose, front, behind, etc. In his development, if he was winning and he was really confident, he would put the pedal down, he'd like twist the knife, he'd close the deal. But we all have those workouts, no matter who you are, where you're not the favorite anymore. It's just not in your wheelhouse. It's just things that you struggle with. And I think in years past, like you look at those, if it's your bad workout, if you're mentally dialed in, your best performance is maybe like 6 or 7. But if you mentally fold, you could get a last place. And I think Tommy used to be back there, where guys who had a better set of skills for that specific workout would start pulling ahead. And instead of racing his best race, minimizing damage and getting that highest placing possible, he would stop racing. And this is the first time for an entire weekend that I saw him race the whole time. Like their first workout, for example, probably didn't go as planned. They got a pretty low score. It was assault bike, synchronized toes to bar, sled push, 3 rounds or 4 rounds, I can't remember. And it was pretty obvious from the start they were falling behind, but he was always the first guy to sit on his bike and start pedaling when he didn't have to. He was always the first guy on the team to have his shoulders down, ready to push the sled. And I think in years past, like I would have seen walking, I would have seen different things that, you know, showed me that he wasn't mentally ready to fight. And then same thing, like on the worm thrusters, like he was out of position. He looked just a little flustered, like they weren't super synchronized, but he kept fighting. Like he kept grinding, he kept going for it. And then just on that first day, like I saw 2 huge opportunities for him to like make his weekend. And he took the right choice. And that was huge for me to see coming from past performances.
What do you think has led him to that? You know, what experiences or what changes needed to be made over years, by the way? So just so we preface, this is not like an overnight thing. This is years of you working with him. But what are some of the big changes that have helped him get there?
One, I think the biggest one was actually losing and coming to grips with how bad he wants it. You know, 2018, he kind of came into regionals as like, people were finally talking about him. He wasn't an underdog. And to be confronted with loss and having to like accept like how bad he wants it and like that it really fucking sucked was an opportunity for him to get a ton better. You know, because at each stage of every athlete's growth, like, you know, first he was the most dominant guy in our gym. Then he was the most dominant guy in Arizona. But, you know, these ponds kept getting bigger and eventually the pond punched back, you know, and it gave him a chance to learn how important that part of the skill set was, to like be mentally dialed in and be willing to say like, I really fucking want this and you're going to have to take it from me.
I love that. The pond punched back. So what were some of the choices? Because it's like, this is a daily choice, right? You don't just make this choice once. You have to make it over and over and over again. What were some of the things that you guys implemented to help him make that choice on a daily basis for, you know, years?
You know, one thing, especially when I moved away, like we used to train together quite frequently. And then I moved away from my wife's job 2 years ago. And one thing that I've consistently told him and like, I think a big conversation was telling him like, hey man, you're going to be the most talented guy 99.9% of the time. Like you're not going to be able to find training partners who can push you. You can have people in the room doing the program that I write for you that make it more enjoyable, but you can beat them hungover, 75% effort, whatever. Like you're going to have to fucking choose day in and day out to get better. Like I'm going to give you the effort that needs to be hit within these workouts, but you need to make that choice to actually do it. Because when he was coming up, like I was better than him. There was other guys in the gym that were better than him. So he had that, like, it was really easy to push and chase us. And then we were pretty even. And then it was super fun because we didn't know who was going to win day in and day out. So it was like really easy to push. And then he got so fucking good that his opportunities to always have someone there to push him were no longer existent. You know, every now and then when he travels to go to Invictus or go to other gyms, like I know a couple of times he came up and trained with Neil, like, yeah, but 99% of the time, like just kept telling him like, dude, you have to choose to get better. You have to choose to do work that is beyond most other people's capabilities and outside of your comfort zone.
I've noticed that a lot with people that almost need to train with the group as opposed to being able to train on their own. Now, obviously there's advantages to both, but it's an interesting idea when somebody can shut the music off, be in a gym by themselves, lights are half lit, and go 100%. You know, it's like if you can do that day in and day out, you think you won't be ready for the field. You know, and I think a lot of people need to think through that a little bit because they're using external stimuli to really get them going every day. And when that goes away, or if they get into a tough situation in a competitive format, you know, they might shut it down. That's such a good point that you made. So moving forward, so just for people that don't know, Tommy and Invictus finished third at the games this year. They had a great Sunday. What are some of the things that you're going to work with him on over the next year to take him even to the next level?
The first thing is, you know, it's funny because we just had this talk, so we're still figuring it out. Tommy's got some other things on his plate as far as life, and he's going to go back to school for a little bit. So this initial block, we're going to try to spend some time to get healthy. You know, he's had some on and off hip and knee problems. So this is something we know, like, hey, after a huge competition, we need to like take the car apart, check all the pieces, give you a little bit of a deload and get back to basics. So for him, that looks like a lot of swimming and a lot of structural work. Those are things that can keep his aerobic system sharp and allow him to refocus on some technique and some actual structural strength that can make him better in the long run. Because one thing about Tommy's still freaking young, man. He just turned 23, little fucker. So he's still going to improve year to year, but we have to take the time to like build that foundation through accumulation and then get into the things that are going to make him better. So right now we're in a phase of taking things a little slower, get back to basics. Over this next year, the big thing will be to again, continue to grow mentally and like go into a leadership role. You know, I think if he goes back to a team, he's going to be the guy on the team. There's very few teams that he could go and be a supporting character. And so that was something that I talked to him about. I was like, you know, you were the guy who kind of like filled in for Invictus and, you know, maybe not the team captain because they had been together and, you know, you're the new guy. No matter where you go now, you're going to be the guy. How are you going to lead? How are you going to do that? And then if he decides to go individual, then it's like, all right, well, what are the lessons you learned this year and things you want to improve upon? Because even though it was a great finish, like with every team, you know this, there's like relationship ups and downs, you know, the strong and, you know, good days and bad days. It's like, all right, take that and learn from it for your own growth. And so I'm excited for him to get through this initial period, zone in on some stuff for the long term this year and really attack it from a, you know, mental perspective. Because I think physically, obviously we can get better. You know, we're never going to stop pushing in that realm, but when he shows up ready to fight on his own for that whole weekend, it's fucking game on with everybody.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just for people to put it in perspective, and Will, if I'm off on these numbers, just correct me, but he clean and jerked 365 at the games. Mm-hmm. The week before, or at least the cycle before the games, he ran a 57-second 400 meter.
No, that was in his taper.
That was in his taper. Okay.
That was like days before the games.
Okay. So in a taper, and he also got what, third on the 6K run?
Yeah, their team got third, and he had some extra weight in his backpack, and he was the second male finisher on the swim.
Jeez.
So yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's like he, you know, he's a strong guy, but people don't fucking know, man. Like he can move. Like he ran when he did the 5K 2018 with Dakota Rager and Landon Collins. He was on their team for Granite Games. He ran right with Dakota Rager. Like he barely lost to a much smaller former Army guy. Like Tommy's turned himself around. Like he's a different animal now.
Interesting. Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, I definitely look forward to seeing what you guys work on over the next year. Will, thanks so much for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Of course, man.
Cool.